Hello everyone, I'd like to introduce our guest speaker today, Ms. Rebecca Hoyt from Disability Rights California.
Everyone, my name is Rebecca Hoyt. Thank you so much for inviting me today, Dr. Kimm. It's a pleasure to speak with all of you. So this is our website. We have a variety of different types of services and units and practice areas at Disability Rights California. We are California's protection and advocacy agency. Each state has a program like ours that works to advance and protect the rights of people with disabilities. And part of our advocacy services is to promote self-advocacy. So we have a variety of self-advocacy resources, events and webinars on our website. I'll share with you our self-advocacy resource page. So these are some of the practice areas that we also provide advice or legal assistance in. So including really any agency or stage of life that someone with a disability may encounter. So we do have a unit that looks at allegations of abuse and neglect. We assist people with voting rights, special education, regional center services. The unit that I work in is called Pathways to Work, and our work focuses on removing barriers to employment for people with disabilities. And tonight we're going to talk about the Department of Rehabilitation and the types of services that they provide. Within the Pathways to Work practice group, we also have a grant where we can assist people who are public benefits recipients in removing other types of barriers to employment. So for example, assistance with an overpayment, reasonable accommodations in higher education or in the workplace, or other types of barriers. Navigating work incentive programs. We have a mental health practice group as well. We have a peer self-advocacy unit, which is people with mental health disabilities that provide community outreach and training to peers with mental health disabilities. And we also have a legislative unit that works to advocate on the state level to make changes that affect people with disabilities in California. So the program that I work in, and then I'll talk with you about tonight in the Pathways to Work practice group, is called the Client Assistance Program. And this is a program that's mandated by Congress. And for each state that has a vocational rehabilitation program, there's a client assistance program that's designed to assist clients and applicants of the Department of Rehabilitation and independent living centers so that they can access services that they need from any Rehab Act funded program. And so within our program, we provide counsel and advice to promote self-advocacy. So initially when folks contact our office, they'll speak with an advocate in real time who can answer their questions, give advice about suggestions for next steps, provide referrals. We do a lot of community outreach and training. And then for people who need assistance beyond counsel and advice, we do provide direct representation. And we do that in a variety of different ways. Sometimes we make a phone call or write a letter on someone's behalf. Sometimes the representation is much more comprehensive, and we may be representing someone in the appeals process, or an administrative hearing at with the Office of Administrative Hearings. And then we also do a lot of systemic advocacy to try to work with our community partners and at the state level to improve policies and regulations that affect people with disabilities who are receiving services from Rehab Act funded partners. Today, some of the topics I'd like to talk to you about are just general employment rates for people with disabilities. What does that landscape look like? Obviously, that landscape is changing quite a bit with COVID-19 and business closures, unemployment rates rising. And then I also want to talk with you about competitive integrated employment, what that means, how to identify it for your students. And then in terms of services provided by the Department of Rehabilitation, there's two categories of services. The first is pre-employment transition services. And then the second is the general Department of Rehabilitation or vocational rehabilitation services. Because many of your students may be pursuing education after high school, I also want to chat with you about how the Department of Rehabilitation funds higher education. It's a very, well-kept secret that the DOR can pay for things like tuition, books, supplies, transportation for students. And it's incredibly impactful when our students can graduate with a degree and not have any debt or student loans, because proportionally people with disabilities tend to have higher expenses and lower incomes compared to their non-disabled peers. And then also some considerations for students attending higher education or training programs that may be helpful in advocating for students in those settings. So this slide shows a bar graph. These are statistics from 2017. They're a little bit dated. Up until this year, they hadn't changed too dramatically. But so this bar graph shows the unemployed rate, people who are employed and people who are not in the labor force at all. And on the left side is people with disabilities, and on the right side is people without disabilities. So as you can see, the number of people with disabilities who are not involved in the labor force at all is significantly higher than their peers without disabilities. So about 80% of people with disabilities are not included in the labor force. And then also in 2017, about 1 in every 10 people with a disability were neither working or looking for work. And to contrast that, it's only about 3 in every 10 people without a disability. Many of those with disabilities are 65 years or older, but people in general tend to have less participation, and particularly folks in younger age groups. So why is employment important? Because employment directly relates to quality of life and poverty rates for people in this country. So when we look at the disparities, in terms of poverty levels for people with and without disabilities, 26% of adults with disabilities are living below the poverty level compared to 16.2% of adults without disabilities. And so that's 16.4% difference, which is pretty significant. And this is representative of people 18 to 64, which is really within the age range that we would consider someone working age. As we, all experience the impact of COVID-19, anytime there's an impact on the economy, business closures, job losses, I, hope it goes without saying in this group, but people with disabilities are always disproportionately impacted by those economic downturns. And so we have to work extra hard, all of us as a community in this moment, to do two things. One, to help people who are at risk of losing their job or have lost a job to regain employment, but also to be insistent that we are not rebuilding the same systems post-COVID-19 that have discriminated against people with disabilities, but that we are really being revolutionary in our thinking right now about how we can improve the systems and outcomes for people with disabilities as we move forward from this time. And this next slide is a graphic that shows 3 vertical circles. The first circle shows competitive integrated employment rates. So these are national. This is California. So for the average wage for folks working in competitive integrated employment at the time of this data, which is 2011, was $9.50 an hour. People who are working in supported or group employment, which is also sometimes referred to as an enclave, we're making $6 an hour, which has a wage gap of $3.50 an hour. There are also many people with disabilities, over 10,000 people with disabilities in California work in sub-minimum wage employment settings that are segregated from the community. And those wages are calculated by someone's productivity over a period of time. It's really the only setting where someone is actually paid for essentially how many widgets they can make compared to their non-disabled peers within an hour. And those wages, vary quite widely, but I have talked to folks who, work full-time and they get a $6 paycheck at the end of the week. So this is really the moment in time and the opportunity to, ask our state legislatures and to work with our partners to help people, particularly students who are at risk of sub-minimum wage employment, to get the services they need to participate in competitive integrated employment. So I've included here the federal definition of competitive integrated employment. And on all the slides, you'll see a citation at the lower right-hand corner in case you are advocating for a student and you want to make reference to this PowerPoint, you're welcome to do so. So competitive integrated employment means wages that are not less than minimum wage, but they should be comparable to the wages that someone else without a disability would make in a similar position. So if John has a disability and he works in customer service, and Jane has a disability and or does not have a disability and she works in customer service, in order for it to be competitive employment, those wages should be comparable. It also must be in a setting that typically takes place in the community with the same degree of integration as employees without disabilities. So examples of what would not be competitive integrated employment is where everyone with the disability is on the same shift or in the same department, and they're essentially segregated from their colleagues or from customers, other folks with and without disabilities who represent the larger community. Something that's interesting in this time is many people are working remotely. So again, we always want to make the comparison between a position held by a person with a disability and the same position held by someone without a disability. So if both of those folks are working remotely and have the same level of interaction with their community, then it is still competitive integrated employment, even if it's remote work. And I make that point because, we don't want to exclude people from opportunities because they need an accommodation like working from home, or there aren't community opportunities available during COVID. So people with disabilities also have the right to the same advancement and benefits opportunities as their peers without disabilities. And it can be full-time work, or it can even be self-employment. Self-employment is a great opportunity for people who have disabilities and maybe have difficulty traveling to a work site, working a regular work week, need flexibility, are very productive one part of the year, but maybe less productive another part of the year. So really the biggest barrier for our collective students and community is creativity, not necessarily someone's physical or other limitations, but really thinking about different ways that work happens and different places where work occurs.
I had a quick question. I don't know if you want to answer this now or at the end, though. You just brought up a very interesting point of we're in the middle of a pandemic, and where, since you're a professional, where do you see our employment trends going post-COVID for individuals with disabilities?
I think this is a time where we in the advocacy community really need to ensure that services from whatever agency someone is receiving services from, whether that be a school district, the Department of Rehabilitation, a regional center, are available and are accessible. It doesn't, necessarily serve the goal if a service is only available on paper, but it's really not benefiting the student or the client. So I think that's a key piece of how we need to think about service delivery in this moment. I also, think that we socially are thinking different about how people work. And in some ways, remote work and the flexibility that, employers have embraced in order to keep businesses going or to keep operations going, in this time has created opportunities for people with disabilities, has made working more accessible. For some people, it's easier to interview on Zoom than in person. There may be less conversations that folks need to have with employers about accommodations before they're offered a position if they're interviewing remotely. There are also, folks, the disability community is very diverse. So, there's also the opposite impact where, people who have traditionally, had difficulty keeping a job, may have lost employment and are now competing with non-disabled peers for the same jobs, and maybe having other accessibility issues in this, sort of remote or different work environment in COVID-19. So I think we just have to be very conscientious of making sure that all of the rights and the protections that are available to people now stay in place, but also really being forward thinking about how the shift in the economy can open doors for people.
Thank you. I appreciate your answer. I know that it's a difficult theory or like thing to think about because everything's so uncertain. So I appreciated your input.
Absolutely. And I hope that, you think about how to organize around issues or, how to support the community. Some of the things that, may take place in that discussion are, for example, if businesses are going to be hiring more as the economy reopens, like should there be diversity standards? Is this a good time for businesses to look at their application and think about, are we asking questions that really draw in talent or are we weeding people out? And so I think this is a pause where my hope is the business community kind of does some introspection as well.